Hello, this is Dr. Cunningham, and welcome to Life Lessons with Dr. Cunningham. And I also have a great guest today, Dr. Dani Moye.
Hi,
Yeah,
nice
Doctor.
to see y'all.
I'm so excited that she's here today. Now, if you all have seen her, you are absolutely correct, because I believe she was my second guest when I first started this channel. But I asked her to return because she is a PhD in marriage and family therapy and a licensed marriage and family therapist. And she is a passionate relational therapist whose specialization is racial trauma, healing, and social justice. And it's very important for her to be here today because we are going to have a great discussion. When I say discussion, it's going to be a discussion. Okay, because June is Caribbean American Heritage Month, and we also celebrate Juneteenth.
Yes.
And so because there are two major essentially holidays in recognition during the month of June, I wanted to make sure we had a great discussion about the celebration of cultural similarities and differences among African Americans and Caribbean Americans. So we may have a discussion today that I may include historical context, but also the relevance of what's happening now and the trends that we are noticing, even regarding census and how that affects our country, our world, how we work together, so there's a lot to discuss. And so let's see how much we are going to extract from the conversation today. But just to start off with, Juneteenth, for those who are unaware or aren't fully aware of the historical context, is a historical event receiving federal recognition now in recent years. And June 19th, 1865, the day all people living in the United States, including the formerly enslaved, were officially granted freedom. And there was a general by the name of Granger, first order of business, where he went to in Texas, and he literally read this proclamation. The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with the proclamation from the executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. Now, there's also, just to share with regards to the trends around Caribbean American heritage, Pew Research shows 1 in 10 Black Americans are immigrants. Now, we're talking about just within the past 2 years. We have those statistics. 4.6 million Black immigrants in the United States. More than half of the Black immigrants in the United States arrived after 2000. So there was a great increase just within the millennium. And Jamaica and Haiti are the top countries of origin for Black immigrants in the United States. So I want to make sure I'm stating that, because I got Jamaican and Haitian family members, and we're growing strong. But then I also believe that your heritage is
Jamaican. Yeah.
Okay, represent Jamaica. All right, so let's start with the origin of Black America. So let's discuss historical context regarding African Americans and Caribbean Americans, arriving in the United States, and how that might play a role in how we navigate in our nation now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes when we think about all that our ancestors had to endure, those transitions, I could imagine, were very overwhelming. At times, it sounds like a lot of unpredictable events were happening. And at times they were being stripped almost of their parts of identity in order to kind of assimilate and join with this country. And so sometimes I just hold a place in my heart where I'm just like, wow. It's like I'm hurt by some of the things that happened, but then I'm also grateful for how far we've come. Like when I think about where it started and where we are now, I get so emotional over just the level of endurance that we maintained in spite of all those transitions and journeys.
Now, would you feel comfortable sharing some of the details with regards to what touches your heart the most regarding the historical context?
Yes. The fact that, we were brought here against our will, a lot of us. And I know more so speaking from because I'm both African American and Caribbean. But speaking from that side, being brought here against our will, having to work a lot of times for free, being expected to not have a voice. I think that hits hard because being a therapist, I open space for voices, you know, I honor them. And so to be told to kind of silence yourself and just do as you're told, I think that's where it really hits. And it reminds me of, you know, like we're talking about, you know, Juneteenth and the idea that a few people knew about what was happening and how things are moving forward, but then there was still a group of people who didn't even know.
Talking about for at least 2 years.
Humiliating, you know,
Yeah,
like
it's the part that's you know, unfortunate is, and I don't even know if it's necessarily like we look at it retrospectively and can think about it in terms of humiliation, but I wonder if during that particular time, again, because there were the system was set up as it was, where literally we have an entire nation that was built on the back of us.
Oh yeah.
And our ancestors.
Yeah.
At the same time, you know, there were individuals, and I'm sure we're trying to block the message from even getting to where it needed to go to.
That's true.
Because that meant that the economy was going to have to change.
Oh, absolutely.
The flow of the
Everything
funds.
relied on the work that we put in.
Right.
Everything.
Right. And so, you know, there's a part of me that wonders, you know, because we see the story now, we understand the historical context of what has occurred, especially with consideration of African Americans. But I'm wondering, like, where is the connection or the intersectionality between Black America or Americans and our historical, you know, context and our heritage, as well as Caribbeans. I mean, I'm aware of, you know, some of it because I've done my own research and speaking to individuals, but there's certain things that have occurred in different Caribbean islands where Europe has had, you know, utilized its power to overtake the different, you know, countries. And so I'm kind of wondering, where are there similarities between like African Americans and Caribbean Americans in our heritage?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm thinking of just the characteristics of us being extremely, extremely resilient. I see that we are innovative. Like when you look at just across the board at a lot of the creativity, when you look at, you know, both the Caribbean and the African American culture, they both bring those creative ideas into various spaces, from the music to the dance to the, it's just so much. And those are central to especially the Caribbean culture, the music, the rhythm, the everything.
African Americans as well. That's the part of the African heritage that we, you know, each hold on. To, right?
And those things got us through. Like when you think about those old spirituals, that's what got us through. It was the singing and the gifts that we collectively brought together. And we focus so much on that and anchored to our faith. So that's a big part of our heritage too.
That's true.
I know my Caribbean side more so, well, it's a mixture. My Caribbean side more so Seventh-day Adventist, Catholic, Christian, and then African American side, Christian, mostly. But faith is a huge part of our heritage, because without that, I don't know how we would have made it, to be honest.
Yeah, understood. I mean, because, you know, faith is something that is not only a spiritual anchor, but then it also provided, you know, a space for resilience, and also I would say protective factors as well.
Yeah.
Because, you know, through faith and biblical principle, that it was the best preachers are the greatest reframers. I mean, that's the best way for me to put it.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Because it's like to say, you know, that one is going through their trials and tribulations, but the Lord is going to bring you through it, and you'll be just fine. And you know, look at the story of Job.
Right.
You know, so like there's a charismatic way about our cultures to express faith, but then also ways of coping. And you know, what I'm wondering is you know, how are we through our culture even now, and we could consider faith what still remains with us, because once we're in America as well, and through generations, especially depending on how much we acculturate, assimilate, like from your perspective, do we still hold on to our heritage as well and carry our heritage with honor in a way that really shows respect and dignity with regards to our ancestors?
So I think I like that you mentioned carry it with honor, because I still think that we have a ways to go. There are so many perspectives about both cultures.
Right.
And there's always assumptions that are floating around and all types of things. And then sometimes Caribbeans and African Americans have their own little thing going on. Right. And so I still feel like we have a ways to go in terms of, I would like to see us anchoring back to being in like a place of collectivity or unity, and understanding one another's plight, one another's journey. Because sometimes there are assumptions made that the African Americans aren't as appreciative of what they were given versus the ones who come over here from the Caribbean and kind of forge their path, and so I think I would like to see us find ways to work together.
I completely agree with that statement, because I would say, again, I've only lived the African American experience. I have, of course, I haven't lived the Caribbean experience at the same time. I've had clients as well as family members that I've had great conversations with regarding, their pride from where they came from, nationally, and and their ethnic heritage. And so sometimes I would hear different narratives, like, for example, the one woman that rings true in my mind, and she was from oh my gosh, what part of Jamaica was she from? She was from the capital. She was from Kingston. And I remember her sharing, she said, well, what do you mean? Like, I have great pride in being Jamaican, even while I'm here in the United States. When I looked at media or all around me were people who looked like me. So I didn't feel like I was other.
Yeah, it was,
and they carried that same pride even in the United States.
Absolutely.
And I felt like it was slightly different than like an African American experience, where it was integrated within the culture because we were literally forced to be here through the Middle Passage. And even thinking about it from the standpoint of that nation of origin, and not fully feeling connected to it because there's so many generations where we had been removed from different parts of Africa. So it's not like I can say, oh, I'm going to meet Auntie over in Ghana, like, 2 weeks from now.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, sometimes we feel like we don't have a place to call home, whereas they do, because they can go back to Jamaica, Trinidad, Haiti, wherever. But for us, it's a little bit of a different experience, because I feel like in some ways we're still piecing together parts of our identity as well. Navigating the educational system in the United States, you don't learn much about their culture. And I think for me, I learned a lot when I went into college and kind of joined different organizations that had people that looked like me in it. And part of that is because my educational experience before that was in predominantly white spaces. And so I kind of had to piece that together along the way. But then, like you said, when you're from the Caribbean, you come over here and you bring that with you. And that's kind of ingrained in you. And then you kind of go out into the world and make it your own. There was something else I wanted to say with that. I'll come back to it.
Well, the point that you're making that I think is great is that, there are educational spaces, but it usually isn't until you get to a collegial level where conversations like that occur. Before then, it usually is the responsibility of the home.
Yes.
And so like my experience was growing up, I had historians within my family. So like, Southern families, like we can view like 10 generations worth of information regarding our heritage. And so like, I grew up with great pride because I knew like, there were certain historical figures that were literally within my family lineage, like Nat Turner.
I love that.
Like, literally I could go to a place over in Virginia, over in Boykins, where there's like a family church, where there's the church is still there, and literally all of the ancestors have been literally buried there. And Nat Turner has his little plot.
Oh, wow.
And like, so to know that I'm a part of,
That's pretty cool.
lineage wise, ancestry,
Oh, yeah.
where there were literally literal revolts.
Yeah.
Like, and he was fighting for freedom.
Oh, yeah.
But,
I love that story.
Yeah, but it's like, so it's like, considering history and the importance of knowing one's history.
Oh, yeah.
And when one learns about their history, I'm wondering how that shifted even your like perspective on where you belong and how you navigate the world, in the United States.
Absolutely. It's like, oh, this is what it's about. It kind of perks you up a bit, like when you think about all that it took to get you to where you're at now.
Right.
I know so on my maternal side, a lot of my family in the South is from Alabama.
All right. I have family from Alabama. That's where my father's from.
It's a small town. It's so small.
No, which town is it?
Abbeville.
No, my father was from Bordeaux.
Okay, so it's like
roads,
20 minutes from Dothan.
What? Okay,
and so
deep south.
And Rosa Parks used to live in Henry County, like where my grandmother was like.
Okay.
And so just for a little bit of time, she lived there. And so when I think about that, I'm just like, wow. And then my grandmother in her 20s, she decided, I want something different. I grew up and I did, sharecropping and this, that, and I want something different for the next generation that I bring in. And so she decided her and my grandpa, once they got married, they came up to Connecticut. I'm like, what brought y'all to Connecticut?
That's the truth.
But what ended up happening was various amounts of family members were coming up here and they were like, oh, we found this, or we found this, opportunity, housing, this, that, and the third. And they all kind of collectively helped each other.
Right.
And started gradually moving up. So I was like, oh, okay, that's how we ended up here. So when you sit and you hear those stories, you're like, okay, now I have to forge my own path.
And knowing all that they have endured, and also we're able to build a better life despite what they endured.
I tell people all the time, one of the reasons why, I love systemic work. I love what we do, but the PhD meant so much more to me than that, because my grandmother had to leave the second grade to help the family with sharecropping. And as her only grandchild, I felt that I needed to take almost like go back and get it, like Sankofa, go back and take back what she didn't have the opportunity to, and so it was just so meaningful to be able to do that. And then to, it's just, it gives you more, like you said, pride in your heritage, pride in all that you're built with because of those who came before you.
Most definitely. And it can definitely be a catalyst or a fuel, especially when navigating different systems where, there are points in time where we have to move beyond the barriers at times. And I always like to focus on kind of the positives and the strengths at the same time. The reality is having to navigate a system that wasn't necessarily as accustomed to us being around.
Right.
I'll put it that way because like, for example, I always share from the beginning, I'm the first person in my family to get a PhD.
Yep.
Now I have other people in my family that have, are going to JDs, but they're more like, extended family kin that I didn't necessarily grow up with. But I also went to schools where, and especially once I got to college, where it was like second, third, fourth, fifth generation, of individuals who are, legacy, at a particular university, or it was expected when they literally were born from their mother's womb, like you're gonna be a doctor just like your mom and dad.
Right.
So it wasn't
being
kind
the
of
first
like,
generation is so different.
It is very different because it's like, thinking about it from the standpoint of not only being first generation regards to a particular educational level, but then also our heritage and to see who had access to what.
Yes.
Now, and it doesn't mean that Black people were not educated. Yes, we were, but at the same time, do we see them as frequently as our counterparts, especially in the United States and understanding our historical context with regards to slavery, and literally we're not taught to read and write and had to learn on our own, sitting a candlelight, with books and literally learning. And so, so I think it's great to for us to be aware of that and how to celebrate that.
Oh,
Now,
absolutely.
what I'm wondering is from your standpoint, and I think you started, you know, alluding to it, but how are we, how is our narrative as far as a collective, as Black Americans, shifting, especially because we're starting to see more of an increase with regards to immigrants, like Haiti and Jamaica is coming through Connecticut, literally, like not just Connecticut, but also the United States. Like there's a great presence of Jamaican,
South
Haitians.
Florida too.
Yeah, and so like literally, it's like to see an increase, though as much of an increase as we are seeing with regards to the numbers, you know, that's got to shift or change, you know, like culture and how we navigate, you know, our day-to-day life. Yeah. Even as Black Americans. And the point being is that, for example, even Juneteenth. Yeah. When I'm celebrating Juneteenth, the first time, and I'm going to be honest, I didn't necessarily celebrate Juneteenth a lot growing up. It wasn't until I was older, until I was fully aware of like the importance of the,
because that's important to us, like knowing why I'm doing it. Why am I celebrating this?
And so I studied it, but then I remember the first Juneteenth I went to. Do you know who I saw mostly? Jamaica was in the building. Really? I'm like, it's Juneteenth. But the first time I went to a Juneteenth, I celebrated over in Philly. So I was like, there's a lot of Jamaicans. And I'm like, there are more Caribbeans celebrating Juneteenth with us than there are. And I was like, I'm hearing reggae and I'm like, and this is Juneteenth. So when I hear that, or when I see that, I'm like, you know, they're celebrating with us. Right. Right. Even if they didn't necessarily ancestrally have that experience, but then they're collectively, they're saying we are with you. But then at the same time, what I'm wondering is like, how do we, you know, more overtly express that, you know, because, you know, I would say all of our, you know, Black, you know, or BIPOC culture ancestrally, you know, our cultures love to party. You know, we like a celebration. That's the thing. We go to everybody else's. We go to St. Patty's. We go to Cinco de Mayo. But when it comes to ours, we need a little bit of.
You know, and I wonder, I'm curious about like, what is it? Like, what are we experiencing? And I've heard various things. Some people are still adjusting to it. I think sometimes we have to recognize that we are worth being celebrated. That's right. You know, and I think sometimes we have a hard time sitting in that space. A lot of us are still working through years of forgiveness that, you know, come from racial trauma. And so when something like this comes out, some of us are like, wait a minute, are we being celebrated? Is this, you know? So we have to give ourselves permission to enjoy that. Like we're moving forward in some ways. I think it starts there too. I think you're making a very great point, because for, you know, us as a collective, as you know, Black people, you know, within America, for us to see the importance of us celebrating ourselves. Yeah, Black joy is important. It really is. I mean, because even the trickle effect, because a lot of times we always end up having the flip side of the conversation, which is, why aren't we supporting our own? Right. When the reality is, it's like, well, you know, who is it that needs or requires permission to be able to celebrate? Exactly. The fact that, you know, us showing up and just being born Black is worth celebrating. Exactly. Just being. Right. Yeah, and so I'm wondering, you know, if you'd like to share a little bit more about, like, if you were to, say, be the United States president. Oh, wow. You know, it's funny. When I was younger, my pastor told me I was going to be Congress, you know, like, meaning that you're in a position to be able to change, like, you know, shift, like, some of the narratives, whether it's through like legislation or the educational system, or, you know, the greater systems, because we think as systemic thinkers, because we're marriage and family therapists. So where would you even start with regards to, or what would you like to see as an ideal way of being able to shift some of the narrative around, you know, us celebrating ourselves as, you know, Black people, or the Black joy, and improving upon the forgiveness of, frankly, what, you know, some individuals have called like the sin against Black people in America. Yeah, yeah. I would love to see us find ways to shift forward while also remembering, because I think that maybe sometimes we feel that if we do allow ourselves this joy or this opportunity to be celebrated, to take up space, to amplify our voices, that we're somehow forgetting what happened to us. was. Like, we could still remember that, and we could still also recognize, wow, like, we have arrived at the place where some of our ancestors only dreamed of being.
Real.
You know, and sometimes it can be hard to realize that when you've gone through a lot.
Right.
And so I would love for us to get to that place.
Yeah, and it sounds like what you're alluding to, and I wasn't sure if we were necessarily going to go into like an extremely clinical conversation, but kind of going from that trauma brain, like, you know, and literally, you know, kind of always being in that hypervigilant mode as a people with consideration of the context. When people are, you know, at least there's some individuals that may be aware of it and some that may not necessarily be aware of it, but at the same time, what is it that is going to help us to be able to heal, like to continue to heal? You know, I already share forgiveness, which is great. And again, being able to focus forward. But if someone's really entrenched in those particular cycles or thoughts of they might not necessarily feel worthy, even just by virtue of either ancestry or the tone of their skin, like how do they move forward?
I think a lot of times we have to find ways to connect to just our identity, the strengths behind it, and going inward and recognizing our Black experience as a positive one. That even though, you know, we may have had to endure various things, that does not take away from who we are as a whole person.
Right. That's right.
And we have to speak life back into those parts too.
Right.
Because honestly, there are still systems in place that weren't built for us, and we can still feel that on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
It's still alive and well, whether it's racism, whether it's prejudice, whether, you know, it's still alive and well. So we have to constantly remind ourselves and feed into our bodies, our minds, our spirits, all the positive things that come with being in the skin that we're in.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, you know, are there particular suggestions that you would have for the audience, like regarding like, you know, affirmation? And, you know,
so actually there's a really good one on YouTube. If I could send it to you.
All right, yeah, I will share it on the description.
It's really good. I want to say it lasts for about 15 minutes. If I'm not mistaken, it's by Dr. Joy Harden Bradford.
Okay.
And it's specifically for Black people. And it speaks to our experience. So it's like a guided meditation to like ground us.
So you're speaking my language now. I love guided meditation.
You love it?
Love guided meditation. And I'm hoping that the audience will as well. But you know, if you haven't engaged in the guided meditation previously, then I would recommend it, because it really is a great way to, the way that I talk about trauma is to reset your nervous system.
Oh yeah. You know, and there's a book I have to send you as well that's on yoga for racial trauma healing.
I've never even heard of it.
Yes, I'm gonna have to.
I have it at home. Racial trauma.
But I could send you the link.
See, excuse me for a moment, y'all. We're about to have a nerd moment, because for real, like I did not realize that they incorporated trauma. You know, because I actually was taught, you know, meditation was something that was actually addressed growing up. I grew up with a pastor, Apostle Cynthia G. West, you know, just since but it's a female pastor. And so, you know, first off, her being a Black woman who is in the Black church and being a pastor, you know, was already great, because to me that I grew up with someone who was a model of what it was like to be a strong Black woman. And feminist slightly, because, you know, in the beginning, for y'all who are grew up in the Black church, know that, you know, it wasn't okay for women to be pastors.
It wasn't, or even be in the pulpit.
Exactly. And literally there were times where she would have to preach, but she couldn't stand in the pulpit. And it wasn't until, you know, it kind of time went along where people started accepting and understanding the importance of women being in the church. I mean, and if we're going to be honest, Christianity really started with women being the preachers. But that's another discussion. Biblical scholars, okay. But with that being said, you know, it was a matter of, you know, focusing on what it meant for, you know, to see a woman that was in a position of power, and for within the Black church. And the reason why I'm saying that is because when someone opens a door, they usually are more likely with being able to discuss particular topics that might not have necessarily been acceptable. And so at one point, it wasn't necessarily acceptable, at least in the Black charismatic church, even Bible-based church, to discuss meditation.
Absolutely. Or
Because
hypnosis.
because it was automatically assumed that it was connected to a particular religion.
Yeah.
When people didn't realize that literally, you're talking about priests in the universal church have been meditating since the beginning of time. And meditation is connected to even African heritage. So when people realize that, they would realize that, meditation has been a part of our ancestry from the beginning.
Deep healing.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then that also goes along with, and we're starting to hear more conversations about the colonization of Christianity, which is different than the original sort of, Christianity as it occurred in Africa prior to us moving to the United States, and then the Bible being utilized against us. When reality was really for us from the beginning, because we were the people that were in the Bibles. So I already know I know I'm preaching to the choir. Don't let me start it. But at the same time, the reason why I'm bringing it up is because I was trained to a certain degree with regards to meditation. It was more like breath work, literally when I was, growing up in the church. But it wasn't until I went to New Hampshire and I made a Black professor, Dr. Walter Lowe, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist and PhD, but he also was a Buddhist. I asked him to actually teach me or to train me how to meditate, because I wanted to understand the depths of meditation. And I know that within the particular religion, and again, I'm still a Christian, y'all. I'm loyal to the Bible. So, but at the same time, King David did meditate too. But the reason why I'm saying is because learning the technique, and I did read the books because I like to make sure that I understand what I'm doing and why.
Absolutely.
And also understanding the differences and the similarities with regards to spiritual practices and how I can utilize them, and to see the importance of the use of meditation, whether it's through movement or through seed or mantra, and all of those particular, I would say sort of like differences or variations of meditation have been so helpful. I mean, even while going through my doctoral process, I remember, because of being in New Hampshire, which I'm sure you can understand. I mean, literally at that time, and I think it's like 98% Caucasian. Now, it was 99% then. The majority of the brown people that were there were African refugees.
Wow.
And the only other brown people that existed in that particular town, Keene, were college students. And a few of them that decided that they were going to reside there once they graduated from school. And so I went from being in Bridgeport, Connecticut, which was a very diverse ethnically. I mean, and literally, even when I went to school, even the Caucasians were like, "Well, I'm Romanian." Like, like I'm from Russia. Like, and they were identifying with their ethnicity. It wasn't about just it wasn't about the racial construct, of Black or white, So there was a pride with regards to ethnicity and nation of origin. And so when I went to, New Hampshire, and they were like, "Live free or die," and I'm like, and I'm surrounded by all these people that were talking about live free or die and social justice, but I'm like, how many brown?
The math wasn't.
It wasn't mathing. The math wasn't mathing. You could have said the statement because that was real. Okay, because with that being said, because I remember driving literally on the main road, which was all of like 2 miles, and they were calling it the concrete jungle.
Oh Lord.
I still love New Hampshire, but I'm just saying, I'm just making a point, which is I'm driving on the road and seeing people kind of looking at me. Well, okay, well, yeah, you have a new brown person that's in town. So, and then the way that I actually got a chance to get to know a lot of were through events, but then also I was a DJ and a news reporter on their local channel, on their local radio. So I would do announcements for like the top 40 pop culture music, and then on the weekends I would do radio for the local news.
Okay. That's amazing.
And so that was my other way of being able to get to know people, especially the locals, because other than that, I was spending time with students. But the reason why I bring up that particular experience is because, there are African Americans or Caribbean Americans, because of, wanting to essentially improve upon their, academic or professional prowess, wanting to improve upon their quality of life. A lot of us are taught from a young age to consider going to different places.
Yeah.
For
To
for
widen our
academics,
lens. Yeah, definitely.
to widen our lens with regards to our life.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and to, you know, place us in a new economic, you know, sort of status. And so because of that, I'm wondering, like, if there's particular wisdoms that you would share with someone, like, you know, how to navigate, you know, being in a space if they aren't necessarily a part of the majority, but then also just be able to still carry the pride of their ancestry.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So I would say what's worked for me is taking that pride with me, because you'll be surprised how many people are just like blown away by all that we come with, all that we bring into the room. So I would say speak about those things, bring them with you, but also don't be afraid to learn something new from others as well, because you guys can kind of exchange ideas, experiences, opportunities, and it can be, I will say, depending on the location and where people's mindsets are, it can be uncomfortable at first, but once you find your tribe, your people, it's really, it feels safer. It definitely does.
Now, can I ask you then, how did you find your tribe?
So for me, I'm a very intuitive person.
Oh, I tell it, because we were having a conversation.
Yes, I'm very intuitive.
You notice the difference with regards to this interview,
right?
The first one just watching, because I even said it too. I was like, look, Dr. Dani, you were checking my spirit on the first one, weren't you? And I was like, I respect the fact, you know, because that's partly cultural, but then also being intuitive and spiritual as well.
Yeah,
because I believe I'm similar in that regard, but I couldn't sit there and just, you know, stare at her and be quiet the whole time on the first interview, you know, because I was going to ask a question. But at the same time, you know, leaving space for literally for people to be able to know and understand how each other think, our perceptions, our perspectives, and also
stay curious.
The vibes that people give.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, definitely.
And so what I'm wondering is again, how do you find your tribe?
So I found my tribe by, I want to say, you could tell a lot about people based on how they respond to things that are happening around them. When negative things are happening, is that person still someone who's cordial, someone who's loving, someone who's engaging? I think also similar interests, like just having some passions. Some people, especially if they're into like travel and music, I just automatically,
travel as well?
You click, you just automatically, it just happens. But I think also just giving yourself an opportunity to I stay curious. I'm a very curious person. So I don't mind like planting myself in a room with everybody who speaks a different language than me, and I'll figure out my my way.
Now, what I'm wondering though is if you don't mind sharing what your personality type is, meaning like, are you introverted, extroverted?
Like I'm an ambivert. Okay. I'm an ambivert, and that's what people. So my close friends, they would think I'm an extrovert because around them, I'm an extrovert.
Understood.
But at work, I'm a totally different Dani.
I'm similar in that regard.
I'm very different in different environments. Yeah. So at work, I'm more reserved, observant. I'm still filling things out. Now in my private practice, I'm more myself. But I change, I interchange between different environments.
Okay.
So I'm an ambivert. It depends on where I'm at.
Okay, because I'm wondering, how would that work for someone who is introverted? Meaning, because to plant yourself in the middle of a situation where you're having to navigate social interactions and it's just completely draining for an introvert.
It could be overwhelming.
Yeah. You know,
I would write down things, ask questions. I keep a notebook. So
yeah, I use my phone this morning.
Yep, take a lot of notes. But when I was a child, I was definitely more introvert. And then as I got older and I started developing my personality, then I became a little more extrovert. So I know that my strengths are dancing, singing, writing. Definitely.
So when's your next book or article?
Listen, everybody keeps saying that. Well, Lord,
I've seen your article in Forbes. So what's going on with the book?
Right. I'm
What's
like, okay, Lord, if you gonna call me out, Lord, then okay.
Yeah, and that's gonna stay on the recording, okay? Because we're gonna hold her accountable.
Because that's confirmation soon.
Marvelous.
It's time to push.
Now, if you need accountability, I'm here for it.
Thank you.
All right,
I
sincerely,
appreciate it.
because it's about all of us, moving forward together and building each other up. And I really mean that sincerely.
Oh yeah.
And so, I look forward to reading your next book.
Okay.
Because I already know.
Already got the title.
I already know you're gonna produce great things. That's what I'm saying. I already know. I'm just waiting for it to manifest.
You're right. You're
Okay.
right. I received that.
And so now what I'm wondering is, how are we going to collectively, as a BIPOC, Black American, African American, Caribbean Americans, going to continue to work together,
Yeah. I would really like us to be open to hearing. Sometimes we have to go back to the beginning and be open to hearing one another's experiences. That's the only way for me, at least, to alleviate assumptions. Because I think that sometimes on both sides, there's a lot of assumptions. But we might find out we have a lot more in common than we think.
I agree that there's always more in common than people realize. And also, I completely agree that conversations are necessary. And they are important conversations, especially when people, pause for a moment to notice who's around them. And also for us to be able to see the value in each other and our lived experiences.
I love that. Seeing the value in each other is important.
Because those lived experiences are part of who we are. And then it also helps to bring about our uniqueness in a positive way,
Absolutely.
And so, I wish we had more time, but I know that you got some places to go, people to see. So I'm not gonna hold her. I'm just saying that because I don't want to tell her business, but she's going to see a special someone. Okay, after this.
Yes, a very special man.
Make it clear, okay? Because for real. So I don't want to be the one to hold her from that special man that she's about to go see. So we're gonna go ahead and end, but honestly, I really do thank you for your time.
Of course,
and
thanks
I'm
for having
hoping
me.
that you will return again for another
Absolutely.
conversation.
I would love to.
Awesome. And then, so thank you, Dr. Dani Moye, marriage and family therapist, licensed marriage family therapist, and PhD. And people can find you
at Instagram, Dr. Dani Renee, or harmonycovewellness.com.
Awesome. And so until next time, you all, I thank you so much for viewing, and you all have a great one.
Great day.